Today's episode is sponsored by Future State Media, experts in off-Amazon traffic for Amazon sellers. Future State Media will build you a custom-made website to deliver sales for you on Amazon. Built to grab traffic from search engines and social media, your site can be used as a secret weapon for launching products on Amazon or just to stabilize your Amazon sales. It means you can also build an email list on autopilot. Go to futurestatemedia.com for your free guide to Google SEO for Amazon sellers today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7 and 8 figure Amazon sellers. And today we're going to be talking also about those who running agencies or thinking of running an agency, a SaaS or some kind of software platform or a consultancy, because we're going to try and broaden our minds a little bit outside the immediate selling physical widgets to end consumers and our mind to that. We have a very interesting man with us today, Aaron Ross, who is the author of Predictable Revenue and the co-author of From Impossible to Inevitable, love the title, and a dad of 9. So a very busy man. We managed to snatch him away from one of the many, many birthday parties that, as you can imagine, happen in his house every year. So Aaron, warm welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, Michael, happy to be here. Yep. Never a dull moment.
No, I bet. And may I say, you have the most exciting wallpaper of any guest we've had on so far, I think, as well. Very, very British almost.
Well,
so
we
predictable.
just moved to Edinburgh, so I'm your neighbor now.
Excellent. Oh wow, amazing. I was assuming you were on the West Coast or somewhere exotic. So
6 weeks ago I was, but yeah, we just landed in Edinburgh.
Oh, congratulations! It's a beautiful city, and my cousin's up there.
Yeah.
So we're being very American now and finding people in common in the same country, in the same state. Predictable Revenue has been called the sales Bible of Silicon Valley, and the Impossible book was just ranked 8th best startup book ever by Book Authority. So obviously you're writing some really seriously good books there. We're going to get into our first episode, which is about nailing a niche, which I think, even though your background is very much not sort of physical widgets to consumers, but I nevertheless would urge anyone listening who is about to click away because it isn't immediately about Amazon to think twice, because nailing a niche and really deciding who you serve is so critical, and everybody gets obsessed with only doing it on Amazon. And I think that in 2020, that's not only lazy, but that's going to get you killed. So tell us a little bit, having put that caveat out there, Aaron, tell us a bit about your background, because obviously you've come from an extraordinary background, but not your traditional Amazon type background at all.
Yeah, no, it's more business to business SaaS. In fact, yeah, the idea of nailing a niche is universal, whether you have an Amazon business or a SaaS business, or you want to do better in your career, honestly, be a specialist at anything. But yeah, I think a lot of where I began was I was early at Salesforce.com, right? Which when I started there back like, I don't know, at least 15 years ago, the late 2000s, there were about 150 people, about 25 million in revenue. And I worked there for a few years. I created the outbound selling function for them. It helped add an extra $100 million to the revenue in a few years. And then after that, I ended up basically publishing Predictable Revenue. And I'm not just an author, I also am an entrepreneur. I'm a co-CEO of a business. We are about 50 people growing, going on 7 million in revenue this year. So I don't just talk about stuff, I actually do it as well, get to put it into practice. And while being I said, father of 9. So what I've seen a lot of, my specialty really has been in business to business, technology, SaaS, software, services. But one thing I've realized through a lot of these companies, whether starting them or advising them or as clients, is there's all these universal issues with people trying to grow a business or start a business. So I'm not an expert in e-commerce. I'm not an expert. I have looked into Amazon because, want to start this Amazon family business more as a project for the kids. Hasn't quite gotten off the ground. It may not. So I know a little bit about Amazon, but I will say my mother grosses about $1 million a year. She's based in the US on Amazon. She sells flower seeds and bulbs. So that's kind of a bit interesting story. But really I think my specialty is helping people find their uniqueness and scale. Basically take a business that's already there and grow it faster. Or at least identify why it's not growing, which is usually most of the problem or most of the battle.
Okay, so really, really interesting. I love the fact that your mother's grossing $1 million a year selling seeds and bulbs. Now that
You
is what we
know,
call specialist.
yeah. And by the way, I think we're kind of skipping ahead, but one reason or the main reason she's doing that is because she got into a lot of like kind of debt financial issues with the IRS in the States. So she had to figure out how to make more money. And I think she's really focused on this for like 5 or 6 years, maybe seven, maybe it's in that range. So, but she'd been an expert in that in gardening as a hobby for like 20 or 30 years before that. So, yeah, just interesting story. But I think it's not even so much techniques on Amazon, but in her case, what I saw is, and look at this, Amazon is so competitive across all these products and things that can be copied so quickly. And somehow she just ended up in a niche where selling basically live bulbs and seeds. And it's just a lot of specialty knowledge and specialty supplier relationships. It's really hard for people to copy. So, but that was based again on like decades of her just interest and love of gardening. So I think that again, this idea of nailing a niche and uh, basically the world is getting busier. And again, no matter where you are, what kind of business, when you can hone in on a specialty, right, and the kind of the right customer with the right message, and that really helps cut through all the noise. That's what we're
Absolutely.
drowning. Everyone's drowning in noise today.
Absolutely, and on Amazon, I'm gonna guess it's not so much noise in the sense of how can I put it for the consumer. It's a lot of signal. So a lot of the results you get on Amazon are probably quite relevant to your query because it's an excellent search engine, I would say, and getting refined all the time. But from the seller's point of view, you've got to cut through a heck of a lot of sound, shall we say? And yeah, as you say, this crazy idea of actually knowing a lot about an area and having great relationships is never going to go out of style. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
no coincidence. I think that your mother has a this deep passion and knowledge, and b these great relationships. There's a platform called Amazon which can help you sell. But I think, I was as guilty of this as anyone back in, I don't know, 2014, I guess, when I started with this stuff. But, the fact that you're on Amazon now doesn't make it unique. I mean, it's basically the world's product. So, yeah, you have to come up with some kind of extreme focus, and which is what we're going to discuss now, I think. So,
Mm-hmm.
why a focused message matters. I mean, I guess we're implying some of it already. We're in a world of overwhelm. There's crazy competition on Amazon. Anyone who's done any product research for like a week can see that. But on the other hand, you and I probably have had this with clients of various different kinds in different ways. You with people, you can add several zeros to their revenue, but I still get this with would-be Amazon sellers are the worst. They want to consider everything in the world, and they really, really resist the idea of focusing down on one specific area. So why is that, do you think?
I think there's a lot of reasons. People ultimately afraid of. There can be a lot of reasons why they're anxious about it. And I know this because I've gone through this myself. If I just pick one thing, first, the fear of missing out. I'll miss out on all those other things. And then there's the fear of kind of being too small. It just feels too small. I want to do something bigger. Or maybe it'll be boring. Like, selling red spoons just feels kind of boring, right? So there's a lot of reasons why people resist specializing or like really honing in on a niche. But I think what happens is once you've done it, and you realize the value of it, it becomes a lot easier where you can really be very specific with all putting, like it takes so much energy to start and grow a business. When you can really know the right customer and the right product and the right message, which is challenging, things move so much faster versus when you're trying to serve too many customers with an unclear message. Again, whether it's on Amazon or whether it's a B2B SaaS company, it's all the same. It's about more human perception. And I think about radio stations. If we had a radio station, 101.5 K Jazz or K Rock, whatever. In the States, we say K, it's like KRAC. And we're a station. We do jazz and we play hip hop and Christmas music and blues and classical and opera. Like basically whatever you want, we can do. It'd be a very confusing radio station versus the opera station or the rock station, which send out a very clear signal to the audience, the people who are the right kind of have the right interests, right? The rock fans know to tune into the rock station. So this is about really sending out a clear signal that's easy for your customers to pick up through all that noise when you nail a niche and really hone in on something as a specialist.
Absolutely, and it's funny you should mention radio stations. One of the impetus for me to start a podcast is because I've always kind of secretly wanted to have be on radio in some form. And the radio that I admire is Radio 4, which is the BBC sort of flagship program, and it basically deals with politics, mostly British politics, quite a lot of American politics, which is kind of odd because it's several thousand miles away, and hardly any European politics except in the last couple of years, as you can imagine. But guess what? That sounds like a specialist subject, but they get 10 million listeners to the major programs, which is a big percentage of the population listens at least once or twice a week. So that's just a sort of the most generic radio station I can think of. Actually, is actually quite specialised when you think about the fact that you could have a podcast that's about British politics, couldn't you? That's pretty specific. And actually, yeah, they do a lot of other stuff as well, but that's the kind of flagship program. So yeah, absolutely. So I suppose it's daring to make a stab at that. So the next question, I guess, becomes that very awkward question of how on earth do you pick a niche? How do you prioritize what you go for? Because most would-be Amazon sellers spend their lives just killing themselves over this and never do anything. But I think it's also true for those who have a lot of skills in this area and want to start a some kind of management company or an agency or whatever. And I can say for sure, having interviewed a lot of them, that everybody's suddenly doing an agency for Amazon sellers that does everything. It does PPC, it does the channel management, so Amazon channel, possibly eBay as well, and other things. Marketplaces, they do listing optimization, they'll deal with photography. Everyone's doing everything. So how on earth do we start to cut through that to make decisions about what we dare to give up and where we focus?
Yeah, but it's not necessarily a bad thing to do everything that way if your specialty and the need in the market is kind of this one-stop shop. Right? If that's the message, it has to be a simple message that solves the pain of the customer. So I think where we start, like I go back to when I left Salesforce.com in 2006, and so I've been doing sales for a few years, a year of M&A for them. But when I left, I was like, I don't want to do sales consulting. I want to go basically find a way to make as much money as I want doing what I love. And so I experimented with things I called, Unique Genius, which was helping people make money through enjoyment, CEO Flow, how to turn your employees into mini CEOs. And fast forward a couple years, 2011, I get married. Right, my wife had 2 kids already. She got pregnant very quickly, so I'm in this place of, oh, okay, I need to make more money now in a more regular way because I've got a family. So of all these things I could do, Unique Genius and the sales and CEO Flow and so on, right? How do I make more money? And this time I had to do it, kind of like my mom had to because of her debt. So I think kind of the criteria is similar, which is you look at your opportunities. Okay, market 1, market 2, market 3, market 4, product 1, whatever these different opportunities are, and you have to kind of look at where do you have your strongest case, like your strongest proof, or the best case for your customers is an important one. So what's been proven in the past to work the best. So for me, that was sales consulting, right? Predictable revenue, because it was the easiest. I always had the sort of the most reputation in that space. And it's also the easiest to prove money, to make money for my customers that way. Another factor is profitability, of course. So, if you can't make money, if you sell $1 million of product and you're not going to make any money at it, it doesn't really matter how much you sell. But I think if I step back, and From Impossible to Inevitable book has a little exercise in this, but here's 2 of the places I think are the most useful. One is which kinds of companies, customers, let's say, are you a need to have versus the kinds of customers when you're a nice to have. So whatever you're doing, like how do you spot it when people really need you? And you can look back, when do people buy the most quickly, pay the most money, and get the best results with you? And versus when they didn't. Because people generally, businesses for sure will buy need to haves, not nice to haves. It's just too hard to buy things. Consumers can go one way or the other, but you're really looking for the differences in when do you get people to buy versus when they and are successful with your product versus when they don't buy, or maybe they buy it and are unsuccessful. So that need to have versus nice to have is very important. And one more thing I would really look at is, with the overwhelm of information, and everyone can make any claim they want on the internet, trust is at a premium. So customers have to first trust that you can deliver on your promise, whether you're a vacuum or whether you're a SaaS company. But the customer also has to trust that they can deliver on the promise for themselves, right? So if you have a weight loss ad, think about this for a customer. You see weight loss ads all the time, or gain muscle ads, right? Gain 20, Bob here gained 20 pounds in a month, right? And so you have all this proof, then this is the best kind of marketing usually, is stories from successful customers. So that's one way that I, as a consumer, can believe whether I'm buying something off Amazon or buying into your agency. Okay, I can believe that you can deliver on this. But then I also have to believe that, okay, well, Bob gained 20 pounds, but why would I do that? It never worked for me in the past. Like, that's not for me. So this trust, both in that you can deliver and that they can actually implement it successfully, is probably just vital. Yeah, this is another key aspect of what I look at in terms of which niche would you focus on, that proof.
That's really, really good. And again, it's this weird phenomenon that happens. It's weird to me anyway. When I get somebody, for example, I've had somebody who was a GP, general practitioner doctor, in Sweden of all places, although he's of age in origin, and was working with me for a while, and then got distracted by family life, which is, it's kind of amazing that with 9 kids you do anything except be a dad, really, to me.
I
But
know,
that's
yeah, it's hard.
congratulations. But he was going to start with some, I can't even remember, some random plastic widget from China. I said to him, look, it's a mad idea, but you know about this problem. I think it was something around some medical issues like diabetes. I can't remember now, and I said, you've spent, decades of your life specializing in this. Surely we should at least consider starting in this area, because you have a giant credibility advantage over, say, if I were to start this business.
Mm-hmm.
I know better than you how to market on Amazon. So just going in there without, your armor on, without that specialism, just seems to be insane. And but I love the fact also that this is something that people don't think about enough, probably, is getting over the consumer's doubt that they can use the widget. And
Yep.
for sure, if it's an impulse buy, if it's under $20, maybe people won't even think about it. But on the other hand, that's an area where the more it's an impulse buy, the more you've got very slim profit margins, because everyone else is doing the same thing, because it's obvious that it's
Yep.
cheaper for people. So
Yeah.
if you're going to get profit margin, you're probably going to have a small amount of price resistance, at least, maybe big price resistance. So you're going to have to sell people on the idea. They're going to have to take a little bit more of a risk, otherwise it's not profitable. So what are your thoughts about how we do that then? I mean, obviously the proof of customer studies shows that you can deliver, but how do we get over Fred, who's worrying that it won't work for him? He's tried it before and failed.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about Amazon itself. Um, well, Amazon, so usually it's like stories or explanation, like making them feel like it's possible, making it feel like it's simple or doable. So sometimes that might be, you include all the pieces with the one package, right? So we actually just ordered a piano because we moved to Edinburgh. Most of our stuff is on ship. And I just grabbed one that's kind of had everything together. It's like a basic piano keyboard and it had a seat, and it had like headphones. It had kind of everything in one place. Just, it felt simple. Okay, great. I don't have to go get all these other things. So that could also look like a guidebook. Or if you did an agency, here's our 7-step process to go take you from step 1, step 2, step 3. So they can see, okay, they can really start to believe that they have these different steps that are broken down in bite-sized chunks, and they can do it. So I think whether it's customer stories of how other people did it, whether it's kind of trying to make it as simple as possible, or laying out the journey, there's different ways to do it. I think what you don't want to do is just like dump on more and more information. You're trying to, because all this takes mental energy from people. Like, it's so hard, like just picking things up. There's so many options. How do you make it simple for people to understand, as simple as possible? So more is not better. More is not bad either. It's not good. It's just you want more clarity, not just more content. And this is true in the content business too. Like, there's so much content anywhere, like content marketing. Just putting out content is not going to get you anything. It's like, okay, how do you put out better content? How do you put out clearer content that resonates more with that kind of specific target audience and is more on point with the pains they feel? So empathy is a vital skill that people need to develop, which is how do you put yourself into the shoes of your customer so you can really kind of read their minds.
That's huge. I think So I'm just, as ever, folks, making notes, which will be at 10kcollective.com. If you want to read a bit more about this, if you're a reader
Yeah.
like myself, you kind of like to see these things written down. Yeah, and I
Twilio.
think
We talked
clarity.
about this.
Sorry.
The Twilio example is a great one.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's I really like that one.
Yeah, Twilio is a company. They're well past hundreds of millions in revenue. They're a SaaS company based out of the United States. They sell a communications API platform, which basically means a lot of other companies that build iPhone apps, well, phone apps or software, when they want to include phone calls or text messages, they use Twilio's technology to power that in whatever they do. So they don't have to build it themselves. Like Uber uses Twilio for all their phone calls and texting. But Twilio is called a platform. You can kind of build whatever you want with it, which is great for some people, but it's actually really hard to sell and market. It's almost like Lego. Lego is a platform in the sense of, okay, hey, we have all these blocks. You can, and the customer says, what do I build with it? Lego says, well, whatever you want. Lego would be a much, much smaller company if they took this approach of just selling blocks, that people can build whatever they want. Lego has been incredibly successful because they pre-package the product. Here's the castle you want. Here's the spaceship you want with all the instructions. And so that's one thing that Twilio has done really well, is to take their communications technology and pre-package certain applications, like in phone customer support centers or in like sales areas. So they kind of are pre-packaging things to make it really easy for customers to see how Twilio can solve their problems. But the way they learned how to do this was, one of the things, I'll just give a couple examples. One of the, the founder was good at this at the beginning, where one of his stories was he went to Las Vegas for a conference, a lead generation conference. One of his investors said, you should just go to this conference. So he had no idea what lead generation was really. He just goes to the conference. The first day he hears a bunch of people talk. And at night, he kind of writes his pitch or rewrites it. And the next day, he goes on stage and was able to describe Twilio in a way that really resonated with the people in this lead generation business, and how the phone call and texting technology and so on could give them better insights and response times for their lead generation funnels. And so it went over really successfully, and then lead generation became a very large part of the Twilio business. So just really listening, finding ways to listen to the customers and really hear what they want, and then giving it to them. Interviews are a great way to do this. You don't need to do 20 interviews. You could do 2 or 3 or 4 if you already have a product. If you're starting a new business from scratch, we can, in the Impossible book, we have a 20 interview rule. But how often do we do an interview just to listen to customers and really trying to understand what's going on in their minds? And one of my favorite examples, last one, Twilio, is Twilio now, I don't know if they have 1,000 employees or I don't know, but they make all their employees, including people like lawyers and HR people, when they started Twilio, they have to build an app with the Twilio technology. So they force every employee there to kind of get a taste of what it's like to be a customer, even in a small way. So I think not enough companies do that. So whatever you can do to help yourself and your employees kind of put themselves in the shoes of the customer and feel what they're doing, that empathy will help in every way, whether it's in kind of the targeting, the marketing, copywriting, selling, etc.
Yeah, this is huge. And by the way, I love the way you put it, and the language is incredibly flexible. Twilio's, as you call it, pre-packaged things for their platform, which could be the most abstract thing in the world. It's business to business, it's sales, but the word pre-packaged applies literally to an Amazon product or an e-commerce product. And
Yep.
in the end, I think people buy stuff from other people, right? And they're answering a need or a pain, whether it's in an office or at home. And indeed, a lot of people buy a lot of Amazon products for office use, or for that matter, a lot of people buy SaaS stuff as well if they are Amazon sellers. But I really love the fact that you've put it that way, and also the story of the Twilio founders just blows my mind. I mean, this must be a super smart guy that he just goes to a conference, he knows nothing about that area, listens to people, writes a pitch the next day. It's just goes down a storm. I mean,
Yeah.
that is complete
Well,
genius.
it is. He didn't need to know that much about that industry he went to. What he knew about was his product, and what he was able to do is listen to the people for a day, and so he could hear what they were saying and talk to them.
Hmm.
So it's actually not. He didn't need to be an expert, and he just needed to know how to listen better and reposition what he had to offer to speak to what they wanted. So it sounds simple.
It
It
does.
takes a lot more practice and
Yeah.
up and down failure. There's the whole journey there. But it is true in principle. Like just keeping that, like what do our customers want? Things are always changing. There's always new competition. Like where is the market moving towards? Um, what do people want? What do people need? How can you give it to them?
But how many people actually? I mean, I'm sure that there's subtleties and practice like anything else, and there's a reason to read the book, which by the way is at, and you can get a couple of free chapters you can get from Impossible to Inevitable anywhere on Amazon or anywhere like that. But also, if you go to fromimpossible.com, you can get a couple of free chapters. And I'm just mentioning at this point because it's obvious there's a lot to plunge into, and even the free chapters I haven't yet finished quite reading them almost, but there's a lot there, so it's great value. But I would say that for all that it might be difficult, how many people who sell on Amazon, for example, or who do SaaS stuff actually spend any time talking to customers? I don't think I spend a lot of time speaking to Amazon sellers who are pretty savvy and hungry and scrappy and growing fast in Amazon masterminds. I can only think of one person, and they were working with an e-commerce company as a consultant outside of the Amazon space who was actually developing a product by talking to customers. It's actually incredibly rare. So I think,
Yeah,
when it's really obvious good thing to do, but most people can't be bothered, that's an automatic competitive advantage
yeah.
sitting
It's
right there to be snatched, right?
important. Yeah, important but not urgent. So it often doesn't get done.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't do it. I talk to a lot of customers not through interviews, but just because I talk to people. Um, but yeah, it usually comes off in that important but not urgent bucket.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so there's a huge sort of massive hint there. If you want a huge competitive advantage that's lying out there, an open secret, talk to people. Um,
I mean,
let's
yeah,
move on to
don't give it away.
no, don't give it away. Yeah, yes, I'm afraid it's out
I
on the
think
podcast now.
I think the hard part. So I would say if you do talk to them, the thing you're really looking for, I would say, are these little it's kind of like you gotta really listen, kind of the hints for the keywords, key phrases, like almost the thoughts they think, because it takes some skill actually to do an interview well to really kind of help people uncover what they're looking for, what they want. Because most people they think they know what they want, but they don't really. So it takes some practice, I think, to do good interviews in a way where you really kind of help elicit some value both to the customer and to yourself. Because it is easy just to talk to people without really learning anything. But interviewing is a skill that could be learned like anything else.
I could say that for sure. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a genius interviewer, but I've done a lot of it and I interview clients for my masterminds and simple ask questions like, "What's your current situation?" Actually, you ask anyone a question about the future, they normally talk about the past. In my experience, I don't know what that says, but it says something profound, and you can tell a lot from somebody who talks in huge detail that they value detail and they want to share their history and you can hear them sort of mentally vomiting it out there and then sort of sorting it out and making sense of it. So if I ask a question like, okay, what is your end goal in the next 5 years? Most people have never thought about that. And that's a profound question in itself that causes them to go away thinking differently, even though you just ask a question. I guess it's the observer effect, isn't it? It's not a neutral thing to ask a question. In fact, it's a very powerful thing. So I've had something of a taste of that. Obviously, haven't done it to the level that the Twilio founder has done, or you, to build things worth hundreds of millions in revenue, but it shows the power there. Let's skip a little bit forward to the question of, well, I guess it's not really skipping. It's the next thing after the Twilio founders extraordinary. We've got our, if you like, the skill set or the skill set that our platform can do, the things that jobs that it can do. You have the need over there, and he matched them up beautifully and added lead generation to one of Twilio's sort of uses of
Mm-hmm.
Twilio. So how can people who, let's take a specific example, how could a person who's got a lot of experience of private labeling and selling their own products on Amazon start to figure out how to apply them to some paying clients to help them with their Amazon needs?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And the great thing about today, you can kind of there's a world of opportunity. You kind of do anything you want. And the bad thing is you can kind of do anything you want. It's like smart people. Smart people can do lots of things, which is great, but the problem is they can do lots of things. So it goes back to this niche. So if you're really starting out, one of the best things you can do is just I find some people that if you are looking for people who just want to get started on Amazon versus ones who have something and want to grow, kind of go out and talk to people and again pick their brains in terms of what they're doing, what they really need help with. Because if you can do 10 things like PPC and copywriting and sourcing and you know, in the early days, you kind of got to try a bunch of stuff to see what's really clicking. But out of that, usually again, you're looking at like, what have you been best at? Yeah, I mean, maybe you've done everything or all 10 things, but what do you have a specialty? Maybe it's copywriting. Maybe it's like project management, really putting it all together to make it simple for someone. So it doesn't have to be just a skill. It could be, what is your unique genius that you help power your success in what you did? Like for me, like engineering systems is one of them. And now content writing, kind of like new ideas and new content. There's lots of things I'm not good at, like project management. And there's a lot of things that my co-CEO is great at that I'm not good at, and vice versa. So what are your real strengths? And
Yeah.
then come up with, then there's the testing period. Go try to sell some stuff. What do you need? Actually, I would say, here's one thing. If you have been successful at Amazon already, write up your own success story. Like anything you can do to, I'm going to use the word boast, to highlight your accomplishments. Do that. And as soon as you can get, maybe you've advised someone else in the past, but one thing that is so important is if you can get a case study, an example of someone else that you've helped. If you have to do it for free, just do it. Some kind of story where you've helped someone else achieve success as well would be probably like one of the first major steps I would really push you to do. Whether you write that up as a blog post or done as a video or something, it makes such a big difference when customers can see that you've helped someone else besides yourself be successful.
Yeah, that exactly ties in with what you were saying earlier with the weight loss product. Okay, here's the case study before and after people. And by the way, these days, the line between that and the sort of the Amazon listing, which has been very, very tightly controlled and still is, but the line between that and the classic TV ad or off Amazon type marketing has already been crossed because a lot of people are now getting access to videos. And the classic thing, if I was selling a weight loss product, I would have a little bit of an infographic or something like that. And if I had sort of about 60 more seconds to run, I would probably have back-to-back customer testimonials and then maybe some kind of call to action at the end. So because there is nothing like social proof, and again, Amazon is sort of created the mania for reviews, and it's now a standardized way of looking at the world. I guess Google made certain ways of looking at the world standard, and Amazon's done that with reviews. So
Yeah.
I'm into that. And also getting case studies and being prepared to do it for free, I think, is a really good one. And
Yeah.
it's weird. It's a
If you
barrier
have
to
to.
entry. It's a barrier in my mind to doing that for some reason. I guess it's a kind of pride, or I don't know what it is. But yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. It's pushing me to get over
Yeah.
myself.
And so one other thing, partners, if you can find, like for me, I kind of need partners to do anything. My wife is a partner at home in lots of ways. A business partner, the main business. When I've done books, I've had partners. I'm a partnering person. So I think I wouldn't, someone told me that England or Britain, UK, is more of a kind of go it alone. You don't need help. I can't remember exactly how they framed it, but I would say even let's say you're starting a new exercise regime. If you have a partner, like it just helps so much to kind of have someone to show up for. Same thing in business, whether they're actually a business partner or just a friend we can talk to, kind of like share goals with, something. I just want, for me, these partners are, I couldn't do it without partners. So it's just so fundamental, whether marketing partners, business partners, anything. It's just, for me, that's, yeah, could not have done it, couldn't do it.
Yeah, I know the
Need a
feeling.
partner.
I find that I have to have things that force me to get work done. If I'm left to my own devices, I often just fall into a slough of too many possibilities and no particular reason to go in any
Yeah,
particular direction. Like they call the
me
logical
too.
ass, isn't it? Stuck equidistant between two exactly same size hay bales. You don't know which one to go for, even though either of them would feed you. Right? That's the classic
Yeah,
poster that I have in my mind. So, and it's interesting thing you're saying about the different business culture. I mean, there are quite a lot of there's a different flavour of business culture here for sure. But I do know a lot of successful Amazon businesses that are partnerships, and in fact, when you scratch the surface, there often is some kind of it may not be equal, but if there's a sort of the lone founder on his own normally has a team or somebody behind them. So yeah, there's quite a correlation between success and having some kind of partnership or structure or team in my experience so far. So one last question we were going to just talk about was this thing about early adopters versus mainstream buyers, because I know that you pointed out something which I've been embarrassed when I read a bit of your book to identify immediately that was true for my business, which is I got started with the business instead of just talking about it. I was terribly pleased with myself, and I've realised that I've sort of hit a barrier quite early on, and sort of stagnated somewhat in some ways. And I think that's because what I was doing was great for early adopters who really liked me and were willing to take a risk on what I had to say. But to break into the mainstream is quite different. So tell us a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, I think it's just more being aware of the different types of buyers. And I'm sure there are people or psychologists who've broken out way more than two types of buyers. But again, I like to keep things simple. So I call so early adopters are the people who will kind of like sign up with you just because they like you or because a friend said that you're good, or because they just see what you're doing and they get it. You don't have to explain it to them. They just understand intuitively. So this is a much smaller part of the market. In the Impossible book, we call it maybe 15%, but it's probably a lot less than that. And so these early adopters are the ones that your business usually attracts in the early days to a few tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or maybe a few million in revenue, depending on the type of business. You're growing to be organically this way, like kind of through friends, family, word of mouth, customer referrals, and so on. But when you start to want to grow, once you hit a plateau of some kind, for a consultant that might be $100,000, or a SaaS business that might be 2 million pounds. So when you hit a plateau and you decide you want to grow faster, you tend to, or you're spending money on paid marketing or paid selling, paid growth. You tend to now start to reach out to mainstream buyers, and mainstream buyers are a lot more conservative. They need a lot more proof, more justification. They don't always kind of get it right away. They don't have that relationship trust ahead of time. So you need to build that up with, again, more proof, social proof, explanations, your lots of presentations and meetings to explain yourself again and again, because they also need to re-explain it to people. So the burden of proof and the amount of information and kind of steps in the sale is much higher with the mainstream buyer. More clarity on the tangible results you need to deliver. They say, how are you going to make them money? You need to be much more clear on. And more documentation, more stuff, and longer decision-making cycles. It's not bad. I think it's just being aware that if you start to run into these people and to grow into that group, you just need to create a lot more structure around whatever it is you're doing. So again, more of a structured sales process or a buying process, more material, more content, more this, more that, more justification, etc., and more patience too.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. And by the way, in terms of physical products as well, just thinking about that audience member, um, I think the sort of early adopters thing of private label products and stuff from China with a logo on it happened already in my experience in 2014. So I think we're already at the stage where, if you're trying to sell physical widgets on Amazon, or for that matter, you're trying to offer yet another service that does listing optimization on Amazon, you're going to have to be, pretty quick to explain and justify yourself why people should use you rather than somebody else because they're crowded markets. The last topic that we've got on the agenda here is the organic versus paid growth, which I suppose that relates back to the early adopters and mainstream thing. Is that right?
It is to some extent, yeah. So it's related in the sense of in the early days when you're getting people in through word of mouth. So we're going to kind of bring it full circle to nailing a niche because you're getting customers who are kind of finding you in some way. They a lot of times get through word of mouth, friends, family, customer referrals, and we call that organic growth. Um, People just kind of come into you, and it's different than when you start to spend money to grow proactively. Like you might spend money on digital advertising or outbound selling, um, sponsorships. And to get a return on that investment is a lot harder because then at that point you tend to start to be trying to reach out to people who don't know you yet, those mainstream buyers. And your past expectations on how easy it was or hard to kind of sell you have to throw out the window, because for this new market, when you're kind of spending money to grow with new types of buyers that are more skeptical, your sales cycles can be longer, and basically you have to have kind of a new expectation that your funnel might be totally different, and it might take a lot longer. So I think a lot of it's expectations, where founders kind of say, oh, my first 200,000 was pretty easy, great, I'll just get the next 200,000 kind of the same way. But it ends up being a lot harder and taking a lot longer than they expected. So they're not really prepared for that journey. I think I would say, like, the lesson when you're trying to grow and trying to break a plateau, and it can be take a lot longer, and you realize a lot more effort to break a plateau than you think it should.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of things in business are like that. But it's very, very interesting that in the end it comes
Yeah,
down to a mindset shift as much as practical things. And I suppose it
yeah,
also presumably comes down to a capitalization realization that if it's going to take you, 6 months to close your average deal as opposed to two, and cost you 3 times as much to acquire a lead, then you need to do your maths and realize that the
yeah,
capitalization and the structures need to be a lot more grown up, right? I'm
yeah.
presuming at that stage as well.
And you may need to kind of evolve your messaging, like the focus of the business. So kind of like most companies struggle to grow because they're not ready to grow. So
Hmm.
looking like, what does it take to be ready to grow? And like this, have nailing a niche, which is knowing your customer and their problem, and having a message, the message and solution for them, and having a repeatable, some sort of service or product which you can deliver in a repeatable, find a repeatable problem and solve it in a repeatable way. So again, it takes, in order to like create more faster growth, first time entrepreneurs often don't realize kind of like all the pieces that need to go into that, because they've been growing and they're like, I've started to plateau. Like, why don't I just grow faster? Like, I'll just spend more money on marketing. But there's a lot of these dynamics that people make the same mistakes over and over again. Again, this nail and niche, there's a reason it's the first part of the From Impossible to Inevitable book. It's because it's the most common challenge that people struggle with in terms of trying to grow faster.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I mean, I having in my very modest scale experienced that to my embarrassment, realized recently how vague and unfocused a lot about my business was. So having read the first couple of chapters, I'm definitely going to be buying the rest of the book and can recommend to everyone From Impossible to Inevitable. Really love the title. And if you want to get the free book chapters, you just go to fromimpossible.com and download that. And I would highly, highly advise you to. It's been really thought provoking already. So we better wrap that episode up there, Aaron. And
Yep.
really amazing thoughts. And please do read the book, guys. That's just great stuff. Thank you.